Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Fireside Chat, the investor case for decentralized enterprise. It's a real privilege to have with us one of the most iconic visionary investors in technology and blockchain, Tim Draper. Tim is the founder of Draper Associates, among other ventures, and an early backer of companies that truly changed the world, including Tesla, Skype, Hotmail, and most important, Bitcoin. Today, we will explore whether decentralization is not just a tax shift, but the biggest reallocation of capital since the internet. So please, give me a very warm welcome and a big round of applause for Tim Draper.
Thank you, Sven. It's a great honor to be here, and I'm a big fan of Berlin, and I'm sorry I'm not there with you. I love that city.
Great to hear, Tim. Great to hear. I hope you're feeling good and ready to go. As I see, you have a nice Bitcoin tie, as always. Maybe one question: how many do you own?
I know this was we were working with Cardano on this, so I really should have a Cardano tie, but I have a lot more Bitcoin than Cardano or ADA.
Okay, perfect. So I would say let's start. You've been investing in decentralized enterprise and protocols for years now. From an investor's perspective, what truly distinguishes a decentralized enterprise from a traditional startup investment?
Actually, I think the panel before me handled this about right. I think trust is what the real value is to decentralization. I think. And as George Schultz said in his last writing, trust is a coin of the realm. If you have trust, you can have freedom. If you have freedom, you can have trust. And I think by decentralizing a token, it allows people the ability to have confidence that there is a backup and that the data is secure, that the money is secure. And yes, you mentioned something about this, but yes, we are going through an anthropological transformation. This is as big as when we went from shells to gold, or gold to the promise of gold, or the promise of gold to the promise of a government to back up a currency. I think this is as big or bigger than those. And each time there was one of those transformations, it made us, humanity, that much richer because we could trade. And that trade becomes, as we move toward computer trade, the trade becomes more frictionless. And the less friction we have in an economy, the wealthier everybody in the economy gets. It's simple. If I have an orange grove and you have a cow, and we have to trade, it's not going to be one orange for one cow. There needs to be this trusted third party. And I think we're in a situation where that trusted third party doesn't have to be a bank and doesn't have to be a government. And in fact, the decentralized tokenization of the world is going to create more trust throughout the world because people don't always trust their government or their bank.
Yeah, these are many convincing reasons to invest into decentralized enterprise, but still many investors, traditional investors, are still hesitant. They have some, let's say, issues and fears maybe to invest because their models don't fit for token. So do you think from that perspective, the traditional one, that we are still facing a fundamental valuation problem, that this is one of the main problems for traditional investors to invest in?
I don't know what really a traditional investor is. I think people should really take note here. I'll give you a few examples. I'm sure there are a lot of examples in Europe of currencies that went out of business. But when I was 10 years old, my father gave me a $1 million bill. He said, "Here's $1 million bill." And I said, "Oh my God, $1 million. What can I do with it?" And he said, "Nothing." And I said, "Why?" And he said, "That's $1 million Confederate dollars." The Confederates lost the war to the Unions in the Civil War in the United States, and everybody wanted Union dollars, and the Confederate money inflated, and the Union dollars became, when they started out 1 to 1, they were 1 million to 1, and then it was eventually no one took any Confederate dollars. I think we're going to go through the same thing with fiat versus crypto. I think you're going to see cryptocurrencies hold their value or build their value, or at least maybe the top 20 of them doing that. And you're going to see people less and less trusting the fiat currencies. I know the dollar drops about, I mean, $1 today is worth $1, and $1 in a year might be worth 90 cents. And a Bitcoin today is worth whatever it's worth. But as more people get wallets, the Bitcoin's going to be worth more and more. Now, the other thing that I think about is Silicon Valley Bank went out of business. And the day they went out of business, I got 15 calls from entrepreneurs saying, "We aren't going to make payroll. The banking system has failed us, and we aren't going to make payroll. How are we going to cover payroll?" And so I had to cut deals with them to make sure that we can make payroll on Monday. Now, they didn't have to because the government bailed it out, but creating more inflation. But it did make me feel like, with all my startups, that every startup or every company should have a treasury, and that treasury should have some money in a big bank, and then some in a smaller bank, because the US government can bail out a smaller bank, and then some in Bitcoin or other crypto, because if the banking system does fall apart, which it was close to in two cases, 2008 and when Silicon Valley Bank went under, and you've got to make sure you've got 2 to 4 weeks, and actually in Europe, I think it's 6 months of payroll that you are personally responsible for in your company. And so it makes you think that not just corporates should be holding Bitcoin or some cryptocurrency as a hedge, at least against the fiat bubble. But families, if you are responsible for a family, and the banking system collapses, the way the drachma collapsed, or the Cyprus collapse, or the Confederate dollar collapsed, you should hold about 6 months worth of cryptocurrency to keep your family alive while you are able to get your act back together. And then you'll relax when there's a big run on the banks. And we're noticing that lots of governments are starting to put Bitcoin into their treasuries. And that is because they realize that their own currencies are at risk. I think we're at a weird inflection point in our society, in our global world, our global economic world. We all thought that the banking government system was all we'd ever have for our lifetimes. And now we've got something better, and it's more trustworthy, and it is fairer. uh, and the government system is in flux. And people are worried about hackers. The hackers have been hacking at the banks for years, and it's amazing we haven't had more of a crisis. So I think, I guess to the people, I mean, to the innovators out there, I would say you already own some Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrencies. Um, and to the laggards out there, I'd say um, you should fear the bank system. You should fear that this is not going to work forever because there is a better technology. Going out there and living your life without any Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency, I think is a little bit like going to war when your opponent has um, brought in gunpowder, but you're very convinced that we should still use knives. I think you've got to, you're going to a gunfight with a knife if you only have fiat currency. So, at first I used to tell all my friends, hey, hey, why don't you buy a little of this? It's going to be kind of interesting. And it might really have a big impact on the global economy. And now I'm saying it is having a big impact on the global economy. And it's better currency, it's a better store of value, it's safer, and you should own it. And if you don't own it, you are putting yourself at risk, and you are going to be desperately clamoring at the bank when we all decide that the banks are no longer good.
Yeah, I think that all shows how important decentralization is. That decentralization is a solution for our society, for the economy, for our financial infrastructure, and so on and so on. But I would like to know, when you invest into application-based blockchain protocols beyond Bitcoin, how important is decentralization as an investment criterion? Like, how much weight do you give this criterion?
It's a big part of my thinking and my mission now. I look, we're backing companies that are creating new government systems. There's one called Prospera that is outside of Honduras, and it's creating a lot more freedom than we have in a lot of other countries, and a lot more trust. And they're all decentralized in their currency, but they are also decentralizing themselves. So they're setting up other operations all around the world, so that if the Honduran location, if the Honduran government, somehow messes with them, they will have many other places from which to operate. And so I think that's kind of and I've seen a lot of DAOs that are decentralized autonomous organizations that are in effect governing in new ways. And I think those innovations are starting to happen where governing becomes something other than what we have that's land-based. People can be governed in many other ways. In fact, a lot of what government provides today is insurance, and most of insurance can be done up in the cloud. It doesn't have to be done in some centralized facility in some that covers some piece of real estate. I think when the internet popped out, all of a sudden the geographic borders started to fall, and we all started to benefit from that. And what I call this period is the roar of the dying lion. Governments now are starting to recognize that they're less relevant. People who govern are realizing they're less relevant, and so they're creating artificial barriers, trade wars, whatever, and wars, and trying to show that they matter. And I think that's a temporary phenomena. And I think in 20 years, we'll get through all that and we'll be back to being one world. And the geographies will have much more fluidity to them, and much more trade will happen across borders, even if we have any borders. So this is, and I think governance will have to compete the way corporates compete for customers. They'll have to start thinking about people as customers, not subjects or constituents. And so I think that's going to change governance. I think if you're a corporate, yeah, I think if you are, from the last panel, I think if you are going into AI, you do realize how many times you get hallucinations. And so trust is going to be really important in AI. And I think decentralization and the security around tokenizing data is going to be pretty mission critical for anybody who gets into the AI world. So I think we're really seeing Satoshi Nakamoto really opened up a new world for all of us, and it's coming.
Yeah.
And I know there have been some great breakthroughs. Cardano with proof of stake made it more energy efficient, but turns out there is some value to being an energy user if you're a token.
Yeah.
Great. Anyways, I rambled on a little bit. So go ahead and ask me another question.
Yeah, because we're running out of time a little bit. So I would like to know, I mean, education is super important for this transformation with blockchain and AI. And my question is, and I know you are very into education, you have your own university. So what do you think, what skills will the next generation of founders need to succeed in a decentralized economy, of course, especially with the AI reshaping, let's say, of everything? So what's important? Do we need MBA programs still, or is it too old already?
I think education is going to go through the education, I hope, is going to go through a major transformation. The things that have messed with education are the non-market forces, like tenure and unionized teachers, and there are some things that have really messed with our education around the world, and standardization of education, I think, is a big problem. I think education should be decentralized and destandardized. I think the creativity of educators should be brought to bear, and I think the best of the educators should rise to the top. And a lot of that education can be transformed because of video. A lot of it can be transformed because AI teaches very, very well. And I get fewer hallucinations on things like history and math and most science. And so I think AI is really good for that. So I think you can actually educate yourself a lot faster with AI and have more time for recess, have more time to get to know people, to understand people, have more time to build robots, to explore space, to cure death, to do whatever it is that you might want to do, because people can I mean, there are a couple of ways for people to be educated. One is to standardize education, and sure, language is a good way to do that. I mean, it's good to standardize a language. Uh, English is kind of the money language now, and that's probably a good thing to have as a standard. But uh, but I think that there are a lot of pieces of education that are better when you get to dig deep. And AI really allows you to just keep digging. And I think students are generally very curious and they really want to dig. And they're going to learn so much more from AI now. Now, what do you do with existing education systems? Um, I was talking to a guy who was the astrophysics, the head of the astrophysics department at Berkeley. And he starts describing what's going on in the teacher's lounge. And when he described it, all I was picturing 10 people in the teacher's lounge and 2 of them saying, wow, the admissions office is doing such a good job. These essays are fantastic. And 6 of them are saying, we got to get rid of this ChatGPT. This AI thing is killing us. And I've been teaching ancient Greek the same way for 50 years, and I don't want to change it. And then 2 of them are saying, this is going to change all of education. How are we going to get in front of that? And how are we going to change it? Okay. And I've started to see some entrepreneurs that are really trying to improve education and trying to innovate around education. And I think the university system, the current system with campuses and centralized and teaching the same thing to everybody that you've taught for years, I think that's going to gradually go away. And I think companies like Duolingo and others are going to thrive. And then I think ChatGPT might end up being a big educator.
Okay, Tim. Thanks a lot. That's all the time we have, unfortunately. I have so many more questions here, but yeah, we have to be strict to the timetable. So thanks a lot for your insights, for your energy.
Things work on time in Germany. I like that.
Pünktlichkeit.
All right, good job. Thanks
so much.
Good questions. I enjoyed being here.
Big applause for Tim. Thank you.